difficult session, to say the least. I just really want to be absolutely certain that people at home can hear, and I'm going to wait for hands up to indicate that they can't, if they can't. Okay, we're going to start. We're going to make a start. I've got hands up from the previous session. So top of my list, I've got Ian McIntosh, Councillor Ian McIntosh.
Thank you, Chair.
Chair, I was hoping to respond to.
Sorry, go ahead.
Chair, I was hoping to respond to Councillor Thomas's, but
no, I've been told that there is no right to reply, Councillor Allard. So, and it was remiss of me to allow that earlier. So, okay, I will allow you to come in just this once. Councillor Allard.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was looking at evidence of the Sustainable Powers Project not achieving what it is achieving. I just draw members' attention to the FRM from last year's budget and compare that to the FRM in this year's budget, and you will see the gap each year is not declining. It is, if anything, increasing. If the Sustainable Powers was being effective, it might be mitigating some extra costs, but it's certainly not closing the gap. That's all I wanted to say, Chair. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Allard. Right, Councillor Ian McIntosh.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Before I start, I just want to request really that we've been experiencing a lot of problems with Zoom over the last few months in not only full council meetings, but other meetings as well, such as standards and so on. I urge everybody to try and pull out all the stops to resolve this, really, because it's going to be embarrassing for us.
Yeah,
Councillor Ian, if you can't get it to work, maybe consider Teams instead. Okay, going back to the agenda relating to the budget, I'm deeply concerned about the impact of rising waste and recycling fees, changes to trade waste permits, and the retendering of contracts for our waste and recycling services within this budget. These financial pressures, coupled with the cost-saving measures such as the removal of cardboard recycling banks and the optimisation of waste collection routes, are likely to have a negative impact on all residents and businesses across Paris. But what's even more concerning is the imminent introduction of the booking system, which was part of last year's budget, but obviously within this budget going forward for household waste and recycling centres. Now, this has caused widespread frustration amongst thousands of Paris residents who fear
Councillor Ian, I'm going to have to just stop you there. This isn't part of the discussion specifically about the budget and about what's in front of us. So have you got a specific point to make regarding the budget?
Well, yes, this is to do with the budget, really, because it's part of the budget. Can I check?
Yeah, I'm being told that it's not part of this year's proposals.
What? Waste and recycling?
Carry on, Councillor McIntosh. Carry on, and we'll make a
decision.
Yeah,
okay. Well, just with reference to the booking system, obviously it's caused a lot of issues with thousands of people throughout the county. And I'd just like to urge the Liberal Democrats to basically follow the example of Shropshire, where they've abandoned it.
I'm going to have to
okay, well, I'll move on to another part of this then, which
if you could, please.
Which is I'm not going to be able to support this budget, not only because of that issue, but also due to the fact that prior to Christmas, the Lib Dems and Labour were suggesting that the council tax was going to go up by 13.5%, which is obviously going to spread fear and concern amongst the poor and vulnerable people. So I'd like to an explanation as where they found the money from to now come down to 8.9%. But also the main problem I've got is with the ongoing service delivery inequity issues, which are affecting our rural communities. Now, I have raised these issues with Cabinet, and I've not seen any attempt to resolve these issues and these disparities for rural residents. So I think it's imperative that we ensure fairness in our service delivery and fiscal responsibilities. So I urge Cabinet to take immediate action and address these concerns substantively and respond to the concerns raised by myself and some of the community councils within my council ward. It is just not fair for us to expect rural residents to pay more for less to subsidise this sustainable Powys where people are going to be prioritised. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ian. Any response from Cabinet to some of the points raised? Councillor David.
First thing I'd say is that we are prioritising people because we're protecting the services that are valued by our residents. Secondly, the sustainable Powys and the impact of sustainable Powys on rural communities, I think in actual fact, at the end of the day, it's going to benefit rural communities because we'll see improvements in links to the hubs from the 13 localities and services to be provided there. In actual fact, if you look what's provided with regard to waste and recycling, highways, etc., there's no change proposed in that. And town and community councils, obviously, they've got their own precept as well that they set, and that can contribute as well to the well-being of rural communities. So I don't accept those points. And I represent a rural ward, and certainly I wouldn't agree with those comments.
Okay, thank you, Councillor David. Okay, I'll move on now to Councillor Adrian Jones. Councillor Adrian.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Now, I'm not sure this is a question because of what you said to Ian about what was in this budget and last year's budget. But my concerns are about the state of the rural unclassified roads. Last year, there was a mention of turning some roads into stone, and that was a part of the budget. I can't see it mentioned this year. Is that going to be part of the policy? Because it's a big concern in my rural ward, lack of maintenance, especially the unclassified roads.
Can I have a response? Councillor Jackie, would you like to respond?
Thank you very much, Councillor Adrian. I think you'll find that on the recommendation 3, this may be something that could interest you because it is an area that we'll be looking at on that recommendation, because we are suggesting in that recommendation that we look at highways as part of the settlement, if that's the wish of the County Council today. So we may have some good news on that one for you.
Sorry, could you just briefly tell me what that says then? We are going to turn some roads to stone, or?
No, we're not doing. We took out of the budget. What we had in the budget last year have been taken out of the budget this year. Out. Yes.
Thank you.
That is not strictly true. That's not strictly true, Leader.
Chairman, if you look at last year's pressures, there's a consistent £20,000 additional every year taken out on. If you look at last year's budget papers on page 6 of the pressures, you'll see there's a £20,000 consistently every year.
That was taken out of the budget this year.
No, additional 20,000. Otherwise, you wouldn't be putting that figure in. Additional on top of the previous 20,000. There's an additional 20,000. Otherwise, it wouldn't be repeated year on year.
Okay. Councillor Matt, sorry, Matt, can I ask you if you'd like to get any comment on that? To clarify, it's something that comes up a lot with the area of public concern. So I think
yeah. So just to confirm, in terms of the 20,000 that was put in terms of unclassified roads, that I can confirm with Councillor Jackie that has been taken out and has been picked up within other services within HTR. So that's no longer going to be taken forward as a cost cutting exercise.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask one more question? The other one's around the booking system for household waste, and especially the north of Powys. There's been a lot of debate and even a position being drawn up, I believe. Now, I've been asked the question several times that if a booking system will be coming into place. Okay, I'll retract that. Thank you, Chair.
I'm being reminded.
So I couldn't hear what you were saying to Ian, so he was bringing the same thing up. So I do apologise.
Yeah, no, not at all. I think I'm just going to remind members that we are discussing this year's forthcoming budget rather than issues that have happened in the past. So that is what we're here to do. So yeah, thank you, Councillor Adrian. Councillor, I've got Peter Lewington down. Peter Lewington, I think he's dropped off, but he was next. Yeah, I think Councillor Peter, you were my list. So Councillor Peter, can I bring you in?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. I think what the problem seems to be is if we respond to something like, can you hear us from you, it takes our hand down unless we're very quick because it thinks we've spoken. So
Yeah.
I think that's what the issue is rather than
Sure, yeah.
No, thank you, Chair. I was looking at Appendix E, the fees and charges, and on page 107, it sets out the increases in the grain waste collection fees, which are going up by over 20% and by £20 since the end of 2024 financial year. I'm sure, as we all know, 2020 is known as a measure of clarity and sharpness. And with that in mind, could I ask how these increases align with the objectives and comments in the Corporate and Strategic Equality Plan? A few examples of which are, 1, we do things to help more people to use our services. 2, climate and nature is at the heart of the plan and everything we do as a council. 3, we continue to support climate and nature, including increasing recycling rates. And 4, we recognise the importance of the council's role in tackling the cost of living challenge. To me, these increased charges seem to contradict these objectives. We are putting obstacles in the way of all of us who want to do our bit for recycling. So I'd be very interested to hear how those increases align with the strategy, please.
Thank you, Councillor. Pete, any response from Cabinet to any of those points made? Councillor Jackie?
Just to respond to Councillor Peter, yes, we do continue to do that through our equality projects, through our corporate plan, and we will continue to do so. And I don't think there's anything else that I have to say on that one. Thank you.
Next on my list, Councillor Jeremy Thorpe. Councillor Jeremy.
As the Cabinet Assistant for Climate Emergency, I want to comment on what's been mentioned here about net zero. Is that better? Can you hear me now? Okay. As the Cabinet Assistant for the Climate Emergency, I want to comment on what's been mentioned here about net zero. To use an analogy, we are in a ship that has a hole in the side and is gradually sinking. We are discussing whether we have enough money to repair the hole as if it is a luxury. It is not a luxury to our children's generation, it is existential. Tell me anything here that is not consistent with the conclusion of the IPCC, the scientifically tested and peer-reviewed consensus of thousands of scientists worldwide. If we don't repair the hole, we will sink. It is not a luxury to keep to our net zero target. Thank you. No, just that comment.
Thank you, Councillor Jeremy. Moving on to Councillor John Yeomans. Councillor John.
Thank you, Chair. This is more about kind of general delivery of services, so I hope you won't stop me. I should start. This is the first time I've spoken, so and having wasted about an hour of my life waiting for things to work, hopefully I can be allowed to press on. I should start by thanking everybody who's helped me along the way, and that includes staff and other councillors trying to help me. I wouldn't claim to be the sharpest tool in the box, and maybe I'm not the right sort of person to be on the council, but I've found since June, really, when I was elected, just my experiences, frustration and disillusionment. And some of you will be aware of this. A kind person in our area and our community council were very, very grateful, or one of the local community councils, put in some grit bins on a side road, but it's a shortcut that a lot of people take, several miles with some really bad slopes on it and some very bad bins, and asked whether I could get those bins filled. There was one broken council bin and another bin with hardly any grit in it. I rang up, and I'm not blaming the member of staff for this, but I was told in the morning of that bad weather that the council hadn't got enough money to put grit on the sides of the roads. I think that might have changed by the afternoon. So go on a day or so, there's no grit in the bins apart from the little bit in the one of them. And as a young chap, a young farmer, phoned me and said, shall I get the council? There's an elderly couple jammed in the road sideways. The road is like glass. So I said that will probably be a complete waste of time. So I said to him I'd get there later, but in the meantime, he got another farmer. They gritted around this car, got them from there. They were very disorientated. Nobody knows quite how long they were there. In the meantime, a council worker did arrive in a lorry just by chance, and they asked him whether he'd help, and he said no, got in the lorry and reversed and went from there. They dragged the car up on the ditch. They managed to get the people, the two elderly people, into this lad's four-wheel drive pickup, got them to the doctors, didn't know who they didn't know who they were so disorientated. So 2 police cars, 3 coppers, a paramedic and car, the doctor, 2 ambulances. They took them to hospital. The lady was so disorientated she fell and smashed her pelvis, all for the sake of not putting a bit of grit in some bins, which I presume is down to living in the times we live in now, where people are frightened of actually doing something positive and using their initiative. As I say, I'm not blaming the member of staff. I'm blaming the life we live in at the moment. And ironically, this lad who's become a sort of local hero for spending the whole day helping them and taking the police back there because it was too dangerous to get the police back to the car. He a little while afterwards, he'd been overcharged by his council tax. And I should add that Jane Thomas is kindly looking into this, but he wrote to the council having been overcharged because they said he wasn't living in his house, but he was. So he wrote to them at the beginning of January, was contacted at the end of January. I'd spoken to them in the meantime, but they're not allowed to discuss those sorts of things with councillors. So at the end of January, they wrote back asking for more information. And on the 5th of February, they sent bailiffs round to a very distressed young chap with a young family to take about 5,000 quid and £500 of bailiff costs on him, which I find astounding. Moving on to the greener Powys, I had a green thing in my background, which I find quite annoying because I don't think it is that green. Everybody seems keen to sell off the family farms and other things. No, I just want to press on really, because I've not spoken in any things at all before, and I've wasted over an hour sitting waiting for the stuff to start working. It hasn't. So I don't want to be rude.
Not at all, but if you can just relate it to as directly as you can to the budget, that would
sure.
Be
okay.
Really good.
Well, they're going about greener Powys. We have numerous woods that have been clear felled in our area. I asked when I was first elected, emailed twice, and eventually got a reply in January. These woods have been felled for over 5 years, which I understand is completely illegal, that they haven't been replanted, and they're now full of brambles. And I know in your area, Chair, you said that there's fallen trees and wind blow going on. So I don't know what's happening there. It doesn't look all that green to me, as well as being illegal. I've asked for a list of trees that will be planted and when they'll be planted, and that hasn't happened. And on the greener Powys thing as well, I'm aware, and I've raised it, that there's 16-seater minibuses going into school with one child on, followed by a stream of parents. Then on to issues in our area, really. I was contacted by 2 residents who contacted the council on a number of occasions about a massive branch hanging over the road on the way to 4 properties. And whilst they were trying to decide whose responsibility it was, nothing was done. I raised it in a community council meeting, and fair play to one of the community councillors, sent some blokes up the next day, because the following day was that enormous storm and this branch was starting to fall. The chap who did it got his men to go and do it, and he also added, it's a place where...
John, I'm going to have to draw this to a close.
Well, just let me say this really quick, because it's really
very
important.
Quickly, if you could.
I will. I just find it astounding, really. It's a place where they tip scalpings. The council tip scalpings. That day, they tipped 3 or 4 ton of hot tar on his yard in amongst the scalpings, passing numerous potholes on their way. I've got heaps more to say. I just find the whole thing astounding. They get consultancy in, which I find an insult to the ability of the staff on the council, because surely they've got enough skills. When I think our sheep look lean, I don't go and ask a consultant to tell me whether to feed them. And I'm quite fed up that I'm not allowed to speak after wasting about an hour of my life waiting for the stuff to get sorted.
John, you have an opportunity to speak. So, yeah, I've given you your opportunity to speak. And a specific question for Cabinet regarding this year's budget, or proposed budget.
Well, I can't support the budget, and I don't think we're allowed to do this. But I think if the council push this budget through, I think that we should take a decrease in our wages minus inflation for whatever they put the budget up for, because I think it's appalling. The amount of waste I see is shocking. And the roads around here, I asked one of the roads blokes why they do such a bad job
I'm going to have to
the roads. Just let me say this, please, Jonathan. I don't want to be rude, and I haven't spoke before, and I'm quite wound up because the Havering Dyfrdwy have been repairing the roads really well. And I asked one of the highways chaps, and he said, "Oh, it's simple. Our blokes are lazy." So I just find it astounding. And astounding that I've had to try and get the toilets working in Manavon because the streamlined system means that the elderly people there were left with no working toilets, and they were told we'll try and get somebody by Havering Dyfrdwy in 7 days. And I don't think that sort of thing is acceptable. And I find it, maybe I'm the wrong person to do this job, but I just find it unacceptable stuff that's going on.
Jeremy's coming yet. Oh, that's it.
Because of the upset caused to members of staff, who many of whom are doing a great deal of work to try and keep the council running as efficiently as they possibly can, if you'd apologise to the members of staff who are doing their very best to keep the council going.
At the beginning, Jonathan, I said how helpful loads of the staff have been to me and loads of the councillors, and I still say that they have been. But I've also found people who, I've got a resident here who hasn't had a response by email.
Okay, no, sorry,
since
I'm going to have to stop that. Yeah. Okay.
So
thank you, John. Right, we will move on. Councillor Bev, I have next on my list.
Yes, I am muted. Thank you, Chair. I'm not really sure I follow that now. I've probably lost my train of thought a little bit. So I think, yes, I was going to mention a bit of a comment really, but I think it's probably not worth saying it now about how it's the Chair's meeting and it's very difficult for you to chair it, but I'm sure, yeah, you did a good job. Anyway, so, right. So I'm going to concentrate on the alternative budget, if that's okay, members, because we've heard all.
Please carry on, Beth.
So I'm going to concentrate on the alternative budget. So really, it's not a question, really, it's more of a comment probably. So as members are probably aware, the an alternative budget was submitted by the independent group that could potentially have seen the council tax increase reduced by 2.25%. At 6.65 as opposed to the table 8.9% that we have in front of us. I've only got a couple of minutes. Obviously, there's 323 pages of budget paper, so I'm not going to digress too far. But obviously, I'm sure members are aware that we spent a considerable amount of hours working on these figures, not being part of the cabinet and not being part of the inner sort of decision-making process. As backbench councillors, it is very difficult to present a alternative budget, but I must thank Councillor Gareth Jones, who spent numerous hours on it, and we did pull something together and we did present an alternative budget. I was told by other members in the chamber that we were wasting our time, but we felt it was worth proceeding. We were told it wouldn't be accepted. They were correct, but despite that, we did push forward and propose some. I was pleased to see that there were several items in our alternative budget that were noted as having potential. They were all dismissed at this stage, but I do look forward to some of those being included in the 26-27 budget. So hopefully that will come to fruition. I do appreciate that Councillor David has a very difficult job in setting a balanced budget along with the 151 officer and all the staff. But I am quite concerned actually that we are condemning many hardworking families into poverty. I do understand, and I've heard many times in this chamber and when I'm sat at home, that we have around 50% of our homes do receive council tax reduction. But I am concerned about those who don't. The average parish wage we know is low compared to the rest of the country. Those 2 adult households that are earning the average parish wage, they do not receive these reductions. I think we all acknowledge, and Cabinet also will acknowledge, it's a fact that we are, and the public, we all are seeing less and less services delivered for more and more money each year. And unfortunately, I'm not quite sure how we get around that, apart from lobbying Welsh Government and national government in Westminster, but hopefully the Cabinet and the leader are proceeding to lobby on our behalf. Out of interest, I don't know if I'm allowed to ask a question, but have we received news from the Senedd to any additional money? I don't know if I'm allowed to ask that at this stage.
Yeah, you're allowed to ask, Jane.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, we've received notification that the Welsh Government have published their budget. We have not received our final settlement figures as yet. So we will need to wait for those, just to be clear, because there are a number of additional commitments, I think, in the Welsh Government budget, including the inclusion of a funding floor at 3.8%. But because there's other commitments, we just need clarity as to what's in the 3.8% and what's not. So we're just waiting for the final settlement to come through.
When are we likely to get that, Jane?
Anytime now.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I wonder if it would be appropriate, if I may ask, if we do get that, if we could be shared that.
I've already
Sorry, thank you. So just to conclude, as an authority and as a cabinet and members of this council, we just need to ask ourselves that if you're happy with the budget tabled before us, and if you're happy with this increase, and if you're conscious allows you to vote for 8.9, then the decision is yours. At this stage, I will not be supporting the 8.9%. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bev. Councillor Gareth Jones. Gareth E. Jones. Sorry, Councillor Jeremy.
Thank you, Chair. At the last finance panel meeting, it was agreed that we would have an appraisal of the last 3 years' budgets to see if what we actually forecast did work or did not. Yet again, we'll be voting today with no understanding of the position of past budgets, whether they were successful or not. And I believe in my world, this would never ever happen. And this, I believe, is incompetent. We should have the information on past budgets. We should know whether they actually reached the targets they were meant to or not. And we should understand the reasons why they failed and would succeeded. But I've been asking for this now for about 5 years, and we're still going to vote today and not really understand. So I'm very good saying I'm extremely disappointed with not having the information we agreed to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jeremy. Councillor David, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I can give. I keep going for the wrong mic. I can give Councillor Jeremy some high-level figures for some previous budgets. The 23-24 budgets came in with an underspend of 1%. The 22-23 was an underspend of 3%, and the budget before that was an underspend of 3%. So as far as the 22-23 budget is concerned, that was almost spot on with the 1%. 23-24 budget is concerned, that was almost spot on with the 1%. The variance is very, very small. The two previous budgets I wasn't responsible for, so I can't comment on those. What generated the underspend of 3%? You'd have to ask my predecessor, you know, what his views were on those. And all I can say is that that's the first budget I set was almost on target with 1%, and I'd expect this budget we're currently in to come in somewhere pretty similar to that. So it's a fairly accurate forecast. Obviously, there'd be variations within each service, but the budget overall, it was almost spot on.
Can I just say thank you for that information, but having an overall doesn't show it service by service. So if one service has done really well, it means it's covering up for another service. We'd actually agreed to have a service by service breakdown to see how the predictions were, and that is what I asked for. Anyway, thank you.
Jane, can I ask you?
Yeah, I'm not a councillor. Thank you. So I think, yes, I do recall the conversation that we had at finance panel, and we do have, as you are aware, a detailed outturn report at each financial year. However, we did provide an email with the tables on that showed by service the actual outturn position for each service. So I believe we forwarded that, but if you have further questions as a result of receiving that, then please let me know and I can give you a little bit more information.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jane. Right now it's Gareth. That's Gareth E. Jones.
You're just muted. Yeah, it takes a pretty good used to, doesn't it?
Yeah, try.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Sorry, apologies. Yeah. So I've got a comment following Councillor Gwynforth's statement about 11:15 this morning, and then 2 questions. The comment is, I think Councillor David and Councillor Peter both said that the majority of schools will be able to set an in-year budget. I think I can do a primary school budget as well as anybody else in the authority based on my previous experience. I've done a budget for my school, looking at that, and I stripped out what I think would be, because I think we are possibly slightly overstaffed at the moment, so I stripped out to what I think is a realistic figure, and I've ended up with a 17,500 in-year overspent. I then asked finance to go through that, and they've come back with a suggested model for the school that shows a £21,000 in-year overspend. So I would just challenge the comments that both Councillor David and Councillor Pete asked. Once we have the final figures from the school service, I will be updating my figures and forwarding my findings to the chair of the Schools Forum Committee. Can I then go to the 2 questions? If I refer to page 25 of the report pack, the table 7 shows the reserves. First question is to Councillor Jackie. Can you tell me how it's intended the 4.4 million spend of use of Transport Equipment Fund reserve is going to be used in the 25-26 year? And also, I don't know who's going to answer this other question, is same question, but in respect to other specific reserves. Then once I get that answer, if you're happy, Chair, I've got 1 further question on another table.
Yeah, so that's fine, Councillor Gareth. Councillor Jackie, did you want to come back first of all?
That's a bit deep for me, Councillor Gareth, to answer that question. So I'd be very pleased if I could bring in the head of service, Matt, to give you a response to that one.
Matt, are you happy to come in there?
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. So in terms of the transport reserve, that's being used to bring in new equipment such as gully machines, mechanical sweepers, or any new fleet that's due imminently. That's going to be used to cover that.
Okay. Gareth, you've got a supplementary question.
No, I'm waiting for the answer to the second part of that first question.
Okay.
Which is the use of the other reserves. It's something like 5 million.
Who's going to answer that? Okay.
I haven't got the detail here this very minute, but I will get it now as we're participating in the meeting, and I'll come back to you on that breakdown. It's a number of different reserves for different purposes.
I'm sorry, Chair, I should have said, could I also thank Jane and the head of finance for their support over the period around the budget. My other question is on page 133 of the report. There's a line there, other pressures in future years not identified. And for the 4 years starting April 26, in the budget that was approved by Cabinet, those figures were £1 million per year, but they're now cumulatively £2.5 million higher. Can I just have an explanation why that is?
Jane, would you like to come back on that?
No, I think that's Chair, if I may, could I ask that question to Councillor Thomas? Councillor Davis as a board holder for finance.
Okay, yeah, Councillor Davis.
Or the leader, because I assume they know.
That referring to the difference in the support for the council tax reduction scheme?
No. It's the line other pressures in future years not identified, which was set at £1 million per year for the 4 years starting April 26, and for the 26-27 years now shown as 1.47 million. No, I know the answer.
Yeah, it's a council tax reduction scheme, and pressures would actually be because of the increase in the council tax, the actual pressure within the scheme itself increases.
No, that's not the council tax reduction schemes up the top of the chart.
Yeah,
this is on page 133, David.
That's come down because an adjustment was made on that. I think originally there was for the 25-26, because the 8.9% increase, there was pressure identified of about £1.2 million, and that carried through. But that had to be adjusted because the following years, that the forecast was the 5%, so they went down to about £660,000. So when we adjusted that, rather than change the whole FRM, we dropped that down into other service pressures.
Yeah, so in effect, the Cabinet and CLT hadn't picked up the mistake that they've made. And I can understand the issue with officers making a simple mistake around they'd use 8.9% for the next 4 years instead of the 5%. They've then corrected that in the council tax reduction line. And as David said, instead of updating the whole budget, they've now actually stuck another £2.5 million in there just to make sure the budget balances.
No, because it's other service pressures. Now that pressure could actually still.
Oh, I understand.
Because the 5% is just a forecast.
I understand that,
forward.
David, I understand that, but the point I'm making, as a cabinet, you approved a budget with the lines in those 4 areas on that line at £1 million. And because I have identified an error in the other line around the council tax reduction scheme, you've actually increased that provision there by the £2.5 million across the 4 years. That's the only point I want to make.
What you identified wasn't anything to do with this year's budget. It doesn't adjust this year's budget.
I know. I'm sorry.
Please, Gareth and David, I could just pause you for a second. Jane, I think Jane would like to come in at this point. Jane.
Just to give some clarity. So after, before this budget was actually published in its form today, we did identify an officer error in the council tax reduction scheme calculation for future years. That was amended and we added that slippage, if you like, in the budget to the pressures, recognising that those pressures need further interrogation as we move through next year and into future years. And with inflation starting to rise again as well, we felt it prudent to increase that pressures line for the time being while we do that more detailed work as we move through the next few years' budgets.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Jane. That's a very full and complete explanation. Thank you. That's completed your questions. Thank you, Gareth. Right, we move on to Councillor Joy.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to speak as anti-poverty champion for the council today, because there are many of our residents that need their voices heard. And with rising household bills, as we know at the moment, many people are struggling to survive. We know that the food bills have gone up, and just recently our water bills have all dropped on people's doorsteps, and they're absolutely have caused major panic because they've gone up such a lot. Hardworking people are struggling. These are people that are not entitled to council tax reductions. These are people that are struggling and are hardworking and have tried to maintain their working life, but are now being hit by all the increases that are coming their way. As we put the council tax up, this is going to have a devastating effect on many of our residents, and we will see more people falling into hardship. This, in effect, will have a knockback on the council due to the fact that many people will end up having to apply for support, which again will hit the council budget. So in years to come, we may see that the council is going to be stuck because people are not going to be able to pay their bills, and it's going to have a bigger impact on what reserves are made and used for people in need. We're seeing people actually going hungry. Just recently, I've had to help people that have not been able to buy food, something that we should be able to make sure that we can have easily. But there are people that are going for weeks on end and this family actually had gone for a whole week without food. It is irrelevant to the budget, Jonathan, because it's about how this affects the people that are going to be able to pay this. And we're seeing, really, I'm hearing from people that are struggling, and by the massive increases that we're going to put on this budget, it affects, because what we also see is the budget has already got services that have been included in the budget, but now we're going to end up with services that they're going to have to pay extra for, such as recycling and going to the sites. This is going to have another impact, and will have an impact again on the council having to clean up fly tipping, which we do see, and we know that it's a cause. But my concern is that we've got people in our communities that are unable to pay their bills. They're worrying. I've recently had somebody contact me who needs medical equipment. They need it at night. They have to have it. They can't pay their bills, so they've actually stopped using their medical equipment. You know, there's people with human lives here. I appreciate the budget. It's a lot of paper. It's a lot of things, but this affects human lives. It affects people, and it affects their ability to live. There are people that have lost their homes recently, and they've been repossessed because they can't pay the mortgages. And I hear constantly from the council, well, we help people that are on low incomes. You only got to be just over the threshold. We don't have to be, you know, it's literally the threshold, and it may only be over £1, but you still have to pay your full council tax then. And you know, those people are the ones then that end up worse off, because they've got to maintain the rest of their household. We're seeing with many people are now visiting baby banks.
Joy, I'm going to have to bring this to a close. Have you got a specific question for Cabinet?
I haven't got a question. It needed to be a statement. Our public cannot afford these increases constantly. We're going up. Well, yes, I have got a question. Why can't we take something out of reserves? We've got large reserves, and I do appreciate we need reserves. But, you know, those reserves were put in for emergencies, and actually maybe we're hitting an emergency so that we don't put our public into great debt and
Thank you, Joy.
deprivation. And it's time, because remember, that affects people's mental health and their well-being, and we're supposed to be protecting that.
Thank you very much, Joy. I'll just see if they want to respond to that. Dipping into reserves for use in a situation like this. I think I know the answer, but David, do you want to say anything?
I'll just say specifically on the reserve situation, as I've already stated, the general fund reserve, which is one of the vertics and the rainy day reserve, is only £10 million with this authority. That's one of the lowest in Wales. I think it's about the third lowest in Wales. So if you're going to classify this as an emergency and you use that reserve, because to be quite frank, to do away with the council tax altogether would use up all that reserve. So my question to you would be, what do you do next year? You cut services. Now, if you want to cut services by £20 million next year, well, I'm afraid the impact of that is going to be far more severe on your residents than anything that's proposed in this budget, because what this budget does do, it's a balanced budget, it's financial resilience, and it allows sustainability going forward. It's protecting services for residents. Now, if you want to use all our reserves, that's going to place us in a very, very difficult situation. In all probability, it will lead us down the road of a future S114. And believe me, you don't want that to happen. Because if you care about the welfare of your residents, you will not be advising me to use the reserves of this council. Thank you.
Can I just say, I didn't ask to use it all. I just asked if we could use some as an amount just to help. I didn't ask. I never said use it all. So I think that was a little unfair that you came back with that, because I actually just said, can we not use a little of our reserves?
Okay, Councillor Clare.
Thank you, Chair. Really appreciate your time. I just really want to follow on from what Councillor Joyce said, really. I've got two questions to ask, but firstly, I'd like to come in just briefly and ask, Councillor McIntosh asked a really good question earlier on about where does the money come from that the Cabinet are able to bring the council tax increase down from 13.5% to 8.9%. And I don't believe that his question was actually answered. So that's my first point. Shall I carry on and go? Sorry. Sorry, Chair, I lost you then.
Yes,
I didn't.
yes, carry on. We'll
okay.
address everything at the same time, Claire.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
right, my first point really is how I would like to know how much has it cost the council over the previous 12 months, providing financial relief to those that have actually had the confidence and the ability, if you like, to reach out and ask for help with council tax support. Those that can't afford to pay it, but have had the ability to actually reach out and ask for help. The ones that struggle to pay the council tax, and the ones that need help. My second point is, how much has it cost Powys? How much does it cost us in fees to carry out litigation against people that can't pay their council tax, that default on payments? And what % of residents haven't been able to pay their council tax in the last 12 months? I'm completely on the same page as Councillor Joy. There's so many people at the moment that are struggling, and just I think the figures that we need to hear should be considered whilst calculating council tax, because surely if the council tax was more affordable, more people will be able to pay it, and indeed that would cost us less in the litigation fees and legal fees that would be, be much more wideable, achievable to kind of get those council tax paid, as opposed to having to take them to court and having to fight for fees.
Thank you, Claire. I mean, there's a couple of questions there relating to the payment.
Yeah, sorry, there were a couple, to be fair.
No, that's fine. Payment or non-payment of council tax. I suspect that they may need to come back to you at a later stage with that sort of level.
Pretty sure. I'd really look forward to hearing kind of those
level
figures.
Of detail, and that we can provide you with that information. Absolutely.
Brilliant.
Thank you,
I just
Claire.
think we just need to take into consideration, like Councillor Joy said, all those are really, really struggling at the moment. And how does that impact on us? And
yeah, absolutely. And you've
legal
made
fees,
that point very, very well. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you.
Councillor Aled, this isn't a repetition of everything you've said before, is it, Councillor Aled?
Can I?
So yes, absolutely. Just
before I bring you in, though, Councillor Aled, if you could just give me a minute.
Yeah, just to answer the question with regard to where we found the savings, etc., to reduce the council tax level from 13.5 down to 8.9. It was fairly obvious that that figure of 13.5 wasn't going to be acceptable, not for the cabinet and indeed not for our residents. So we had to do everything in our power to reduce that figure and make it more manageable. And that was found through additional grant funding, further staffing reductions, reduction in provider uplifts, freedom leisure contract. There's some re-examination of that and some small savings there. But in a sense, what happened, we actually asked our heads of service, our directors, to go away and revisit efficiencies within their services. And those, coupled with additional grant funding that came in, allowed it to reduce the level of council tax. With regard to the support that residents have received for council tax, it's £13 million, and that £8.9 million actually comes through with the SSA and in the RSG. The Welsh Government actually supports some of that.
Thank you very much, Councillor David. Councillor Aled, this isn't a repetition of anything you said before, is it?
Absolutely not, Chair.
Okay. Over to you, Councillor.
But if I can have more than a minute without repetition, I'd be really grateful.
Go for it.
Thank you. I do sympathise with Councillor David Thomas. He's got a really difficult task. His task has been made even more difficult by the distinguished Chancellor and economist Rachel Reeves. Much of the pressures we see in this budget is down to her budget in the autumn, and there will be more further bad news when it comes to the spending review going forward. And they were elected on a promise of no austerity, etc., etc. And we can see the growth forecast is going down. Inflation is not coming down; it's reluctant to fall, and interest rates are not coming down as fast as we thought it would happen. And that is costing this council £1.7 million, Councillor Jake. It's very relevant to this council's budget. the decisions taken by the Chancellor has huge impacts on this council's budget. And we have got one of the most expensive council tax in Wales. And that, again, is thanks to the Welsh Government, the Labour Welsh Government, who set the funding formula, making one of the local authorities with the lowest take-home pay for the highest level of council tax. But I have to question the council's priorities. Every penny they spend is public money, and every penny has to be accounted for. And then your decision, Cabinet, to spend £100,000 on electric vehicle officer, so they can say how fast you can drive over potholes in an electric car, I assume, and the sustainable travel officer. So that sort of money, £100,000 expenditure, is quite ridiculous when we have so many potholes across our county. And I must sympathise with Councillor Yeomans. He made a really important point. It's about attention to detail when managing these budgets to make sure that every penny is spent well. The priority of this council on achieving net zero by 2030, I don't think will work. Even the chief executive says that that's not achievable by 2030. It will be an impossible task for this council. So can I also go back to a previous question where the debate on the the booking system was shut down? But in last year's budget, if you look at the pressures in the cost reductions, there's £300,000 cost reduction for this financial year. That doesn't appear in this in this budget. Why not? Because we are only voting on one year's budget at a time. So where has that £300,000 cut indicated in last year's budget? Where has that gone this year? And one final question for the roads minister, portfolio holder for roads. How much revenue budget was spent on road repairs last year? And how much money will it be spent on road repairs this year when you take inflation into account? And I'm very unhappy about the Cabinet putting in that third recommendation, because Councillor Thomas himself used the word hypothetical. It might be because of the fantastic services of Zoom and translation. We might actually get the answer before we have to vote on the budget. But why are you putting a hypothetical line, an important line, a recommendation into the council's budget? Why is that allowed to happen? Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hallett. We have
several questions there, three at least. One referred to the £100,000 electric vehicle officer, the £300,000 cut, and comparison between road repair costs last year and this year.
Can I just, I'll address the questions on relevant to highways. I'm sure Councillor Jackie or the head of service or the director would pick those up. But I just want to tackle this issue about my colleague Rachel Reeves up in Westminster, what was that too? Certainly spent more time than I have reading economics, but I've certainly spent 5 years, so I'm a little knowledgeable on it. But let's be realistic here. This authority has lost about £136 million over the last 10 years. Yet we still continue to provide services to our residents. We still offer our children education. We still offer our elderly residents in the need of care. We still offer them assistance and care. We still offer vulnerable children the care they need. And it goes on and on and on. Despite the fact that we've lost £136 million from our budget. And 14 years of that period were not because of this government, but because of a previous government. And during that period, I'd just like to point out to the leader of the Tory party that you were in my position and you actually set a council tax on one stage at 9.5% increase. And what I'd say to you is you set that when interest rates were almost zero and inflation was almost going into a deflationary position. So don't lecture me about having to deliver difficult budgets when I've got interest rates at 4.5% and inflation at 2.8, just gone up 3%. But the one thing I will say about Rachel Reeves' budget, if you'd have listened to what was said in our budget in the autumn, the budget was designed around fiscal measures in the budget to generate growth. Now,
where's the growth?
0.1%, but that's a legacy of what you left, what your party left behind. If that growth does mature and realise, then we will see a situation where interest rates will stabilise, and that in turn will allow inflation to come down. So this isn't about last October, it's all about what happened before that. I've just given you the evidence for the way you manage.
Specific points by Councillor Allard relating to the benefits or not of employing an officer at considerable cost. Look at electric vehicles, the £300,000 cut, and road repair comparators between last year and this year. Councillor Jackie, are you in a position to answer some of those?
I can give you a response. There's an echo. Somebody's still got the microphone on. I'll try again. That's better. I think, yeah, that's better. There's two sets of 100,000s there, Councillor Allard. The one for the two officers, that there's a breakdown. Some of that is grant funding as well, but I'll take you across to Matt just to explain how that's being spent. There's £100,000 is an undelivered saving, so the 300,000 is still in there this year, but it's there's 100,000 from undelivered savings last year, and the road repairs for last year and this year. Again, I'll take you across to Matt, who will have those figures in front of him. I'm hoping.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jackie. Matt, there's nothing you want to add?
Yeah. If I come in, Chair,
Yeah,
is that all right?
yeah.
So in terms of the electrical vehicle officer and the sustainable travel officer, they're assisting Powys to achieve the carbon reduction targets by providing education and awareness on sustainable modes of transport on the provision of electric vehicle points around the county. The positions receive transformation funding, which will continue until December 2025. So the pressure of the 36K is to fund the positions to the end of 25-26 financial year. So that's it in terms of those specific officers. In terms of the revenue, we got revenue and capital for highways. We've got roughly about £3 million that we use on revenue to fund our highways programme. And then we've got capital, which across the county is 8.1 million, rising to 10.6 and then 13.4 million. But we are confident, and I say that we're hoping that we'll get additional funding in conjunction with WLGA to bring in additional funding just to concentrate on highway maintenance. And I know for you as members, the C roads and classified roads are particular issues, and that's something I want to work with the team on and yourselves to try and address going forward. But that's it in terms of the funding. In terms of the HWRC, there was a pressure in terms of the contract, but we've been fortunate to receive capital funding through the End Producer Responsibility Scheme. So that has brought additional funding in, which has helped us then reduce or in fact take out that pressure for the HWRCs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you much, Matt. Yeah. Matt, would you be able to send that information to Allard? Yeah, Councillor Allard? Yeah. Okay, we'll do that. Thank you very much.
I see a number of hands up now. I can see that
we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Unless there's anything very new, I'm going to take Councillor Lucy as the last speaker on this. So I'll move on to Councillor Richard Church now.
Thank you, Chair. My hand was up only to move that we go to a vote. And I notice you've said that. I think probably you'll do that already, but perhaps after everybody has spoken once, it's time to move to a vote.
Happy with that. Councillor Peter we got next. Councillor Peter James.
Thank you, Chair. My question is that at the members' meeting for Sustainable Powys, I did make the point of who was going to pay for the halls that we actually have the meetings in for the community councils and the councillors under the sustainability? Well, we have held our meeting, and in attendance was Gareth E. Jones, Brian Davis from Llanafon Vawr, and Aberedu for Gareth E. Davis. Also, Jeremy Pugh from Builth Wells, and myself from Llangamach and Llanuwchllyn Wells, and also including community council chairs and their member that they took with them. So I'm just going to ask, is Powys made a little bit of a budget to one side for hosting these, as I've ended up with a bill from Trabad Village Hall, and I wonder if there was a budget put aside, because these are going to be meetings on a regular basis as we're having group meetings.
Thank you very much, Councillor Peter. Somebody want to respond?
My understanding is the last confirmation on this from the 151.
Can you just hold on a second? We have a considerable echo. Can everybody check that they're muted, please? Sorry, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. There is a small budget for sustainable Powys, and I believe that that's in the transformation budget. Perhaps the 151 officer could confirm that.
Thank you.
In terms of new stepping off, apologies. There is an allocation within the Sustainable Powys programme budget that actually funds the officer that looks after the whole programme and oversees that. So there is a small allocation there.
So do I actually bring the invoice to you or to Willem, the facilitator?
Diolch yn fawr, gyfeillion, diolch. Os gael ddatganiad ar y cyd fan hyn. Ar daith bywyd, mae rhywun yn dod ar draws ac i wybod pwy yw ei ffrindiau, pwy sy'n driw ac yn ddidwyll, ac mi nes I a Chymru golli ffrind o'r fath yn ddiweddar. Un a rhoddai ei phobl, ein cymunedau a Cymru'n gyntaf. Un oedd yn barod I weithio'n drawsbleidiol mwyn Cymru.
So if you could just pause just for a few seconds, just to allow you to switch over to translate. It's working perfectly well. You just need to switch. Yeah.
Okay.
Diolch, Elwyn.
Un oedd yn barod I weithio'n drawsbleidiol mwyn Cymru. Sorry. Right. Un oedd yn barod I weithio'n drawsbleidiol mwyn Cymru, a dyna'n union dwi'n barod I wneud. Ac felly mi fydd y toriad y falch o glywed dwi ddim am ymosod arnynt eleni. Atgoffa pobl o drychinebau 15 mlynedd diwetha o Liz Truss ac ati. Dim ond y falch i'ch gweld chi yma heddiw, yn hytrach na mewn cwrdd gweddi dramor. Wrth edrych ar gyllideb heddiw, mae angen chydig o nestrwydd. Dim ots pwy fyddai mewn grym, mi fyddai penderfyniadau anodd, gwasgfariannol, pwysau y pob cyfeiriad. Dyna pam angen bod onest am y newidiadau sydd angen. Yn yr adegau tywyll hyn, mae llawer I hawdd I weiddi ar y cyfryngau cymdeithasol, I wneud datganiadau ysgubol ac I feio, ond mae modd cael goleuni, positifrwydd a gobaith. Mae angen gwared o'r fformula cyllid Barnett I Gymru a cael un sy'n adlewyrchiad cywir a cyfoes o'n anghenion, nid rhywbeth wedi wreiddio yn y 1970au. Yn gyllideb, cafodd Gogledd Iwerddon 735 pint y person, yr Alban 620 a dim ond 541 y person I Gymru. Tan ni'n cael ein cyllido fel yr Alban, byddai'n golygu 237 miliwn yn fwy I Gymru. Hefyd rhoi y 4 biliwn dyledus I Gymru o gyllido HS2 a fyddai'n trawsnewid ein rhwydwaith ffyrdd a reilffyrdd. Ac wrth gwrs datganoli stad y goron ac ei cronfa cyfoeth gan ddefnyddio ein adnoddau gwynt a dŵr I fuddsoddi mewn dyfodol cynaladwy. Mae gwerth y stad wedi cynyddu o 49.2 miliwn yn 2020. Perhaps if you listen, you'd learn. I 853 miliwn nawr. Mae 75% o'r incwm yn mynd i'r tysorlus a 25% i'r goron. Mae eisoes wedi datganoli i'r Alban. Byddai hyn I gyd yn trawsnewid cyllido ein gwasanaethu. cefnogi ein cymunedau ac tynnu'r pwysau oddi ar ysgwyddau pawb ond trethdalwyr. Yn adeiladu ein cenedl fel fyddai Tom Ellis cyn aelod Senedd Meirionnydd ac un arweinwyr Cymru Fydd ac arwr Dafydd Ellis Thomas a mi yn ei ddweud. Y peth gorau gall ddigwydd heddiw fyddai undod gwleidyddol o blaid hynny os am wir newid. Llai y chwarae plant a cael newid go iawn a rhoi Cymru'n gyntaf. Oherwydd hynny, ni fyddwn yn pleidleisio o blaid y gyllideb yma heddiw, ond ddim chwaith yn pleidleisio yn erbyn. Diolch Dafydd am rhoi Cymru'n gyntaf. Diolch. Can I just say also, Chair, when I do presentations in Welsh, I do expect members of this audience, members of the council, to pay due respect and listen to our national language and not treat it as contempt. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch Elwyn, and I'm sorry if I didn't notice that happening, but if it was, I can only apologise on behalf of the council. We all should, of course, take that seriously. Thank you. You're not, Elwyn, you're not looking for a response to any points made there. Okay, thank you very much. Diolch. Councillor Bev, I'll say the same as I said to Councillor Aled. You're not wanting to repeat anything. You're not actually wanting to say anything. Completely different. Go for it.
Sorry, apologies. If you could allow me just a couple of moments. Sorry, I know it's not normal precedent to allow people to come back, so I apologise in advance. I was too keen probably to just mention our alternative budget earlier. But as a WALGA council member that represents this authority, I have received an email that popped up in the corner of my screen when one of our previous speakers was talking about the Welsh Government's final budget. And I just wanted to raise the question, and I just wanted to ask and have some reassurance really, as to are we actually in a position at this precise moment in time to vote for or against, whichever way it may be, for this budget, because due to the information that is currently filtering through in my emails. The Welsh Government have announced the 3.8% funding floor, so I presume item 3 on the recommendations now stands, well, it needs amending because item 3 is not should, it is 3.8%. And I'm sure all members will welcome the news that there will be an additional £30 million for social care. But how much of that are we going to receive at Powys County Council? How is that going to affect our budget? It might be minuscule.
Thank you, Councillor Bev, for that. You have actually used a 5-minute time allocation, but thank you for that.
What, that was 5 minutes?
No, it's 5 minutes in total.
Oh, apologies.
Yes, so you'd actually, I'll give you the benefit
yet
of the doubt
again,
there.
we're being silent.
You actually had 5 seconds left. I've given you a little bit more. So thank you for that live update. We'll address.
It's a shame, because I was going to thank our elected Senate member Jane Dodds, but if the current administration don't want me to, that's absolutely fine. Because there was more, but that's absolutely.
Well, sadly, you haven't had the opportunity to do that, so we missed that. Thank you. I'm sure we'll address the update that you gave us, and thank you for that. The live update when we come to vote in a few moments' time.
Sorry, there was actually a question. The question was, which I'm allowed to ask because I was in my 5 minutes. Are we allowed to vote? Is it sensible to be voting for a budget when we don't actually know what we're going to?
Yes, the 3.8% floor has been confirmed, and that would give us about £1.17 million extra. So that, I'm coming to that. The rest of it would actually come to us in the form of grants, which won't alter the actual bottom line of the budget that you've been presented with today. So it won't impact this budget in any way whatsoever.
Councillor Lucy Roberts.
Chair. It's a very quick one from me. I just wanted to raise a concern about waste and making sure that we are avoiding any element of waste in the council. I know all the different services think that they're doing everything they possibly can to avoid waste, but I seem to recall that when we were looking at the budgets and looking at Freedom Leisure, that there some additional money was found because we were paying for services that we were not actually receiving. And I know, talking to Councillor John Yeomans, one of his concerns was about a vast payment for tree surgery in his ward, which cost far more than a normal tree surgeon would have charged for it. And in my own ward, I mean, I'm really grateful for a lot of tremendous work that's been done in my ward. There's been some fantastic things done, but one of my great frustrations was to see a ditch being dug, a completely new ditch, several hundred metres of it, in a site where there was absolutely no need for it and no benefit from that ditch. So I still don't feel confident that we are reducing every element of waste that we could do, and by doing that, it would help to bring the council tax down. Thank you.
Councillor Lucy, the issue of waste, it comes up time and time again, doesn't it, when people talk about the council? Anybody want to talk about that? Efforts to reduce it? No.
Sorry, I'd just like to raise an actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I appreciate that I have already had a couple of minutes, or 3 minutes 55 seconds, but actually I think it's grossly unfair that I wasn't allowed to just conclude for another 60 seconds, but other members of this chamber and a member online were allowed absolutely way over 5 minutes. And if we're going to treat people the same, that's fair. But I'm really disappointed with that I was not allowed to continue when other people have been allowed to continue in this chamber and haven't been silenced like I was.
Apologies, Councillor Bev. I was getting a strong indication from my Chief Monitoring Officer showing me times recorded, and I didn't realise, but he's been diligent recording times.
Well, I suggest we go back and we have a look what other members, how much other members took, without mentioning other members' names. There are members in this chamber that have spoken far longer than 5 minutes. So why have I, as the joint leader of the opposition, been silenced when other people in this chamber have not? It's not right and it's not fair.
Okay, apologies, Councillor Bev. I was only following the instructions given by my Chief Monitoring Officer, who indicated that I had allowed you far more than the allocated time. Yep, sorry. Yep. Okay.
Well, no, not really. I was going to thank our Senate member, that Jane Dodds, that had obviously done an agreement with the current Labour government to get the vote passed. There's some excellent good news in that budget that I thought members might wanted to hear, such as money for Wyeside and the North Wales, North Powys project, wellbeing project. But if we're not interested, because obviously I probably stole the Cabinet's thunder and that's the problem, then I will be silent and we can continue and let's move to the vote then.
Yeah.
Councillors, you've had Councillor James Gibson-Watt.
Thank you very much. Talking about it. Thank you very much. I know you want Lucy, Councillor Lucy to be the last speaker, and I apologise for putting my hand up after you'd already said that. But I just thought it is important. I wanted to make a few points I made from my position as leader of the council. Quite a lot's been made of the fact that initially there was talk of council tax increase of 13.5%, and indeed before the autumn statement by the UK Chancellor, that it would look indeed where we might have been at a minimum. Indeed, at that point, I was far from confident that this council would be able to, that this cabinet would be able to propose a balanced budget to the council for the council to consider, let alone vote on. I have to say, without the Chancellor's autumn statement, I think that would have been the case. But the reason we are able to remove the council tax down to a level which we all agree is still far too high. None of us want to impose a council tax at this level. It's a very uncomfortable place for all of us to be. But the reason we're able to even do that is because of the extra money that is coming in this year, and also because I'd just like to remind members that we were working on the assumption that we were going to get a flat cash settlement based upon the previous Chancellor's budget delivered last March. If that had been the case, this council would have been in deep trouble, as would all local governments across England and Wales, and probably Scotland as well. So we should be thankful that despite some of the unwelcome things in the Chancellor's Autumn Statement, we did at least get a settlement which was above that cash. Even though at now 3.8%, we might like it to be higher. Indeed, of course, we would like it to be a higher settlement to deal with the extraordinary situation which we find all public authorities find themselves in at the moment. And indeed, the events of the last month, I have to just mention the more general situation in the world, have made the future look even more uncertain. If it is the case that, for example, the United Kingdom government has to divert yet more resources into defence, which seems to be almost an inevitable consequence of what has taken place in the last few days, let alone months. Goodness knows what that will mean for public finances and for our ability as a local authority and all others to deliver the services that our residents are so dependent on in the future. So I just thought I really ought to make this point. These are really difficult times. And we'd all like to see lower increases of the council tax. We'd all like to see a situation where we don't have to pay the nice for services to find to make staff redundant. You know, all local authorities are facing this, all in the situation. And we all feel it very deeply, and it is a really uncomfortable thing to do. But given the uncertainty that we face, I think if we're not to agree this budget today, we are going to place not so much the council, but our residents in jeopardy, and we mustn't do that. We really mustn't. So I would implore members to support this budget today. I understand, I've been in the position of opposition. I know how very difficult it is to formulate an alternative budget because we've been there and it's very frustrating. And yeah, we're all politicians, and I don't expect people to set aside their political hats. Of course not, but that wouldn't be right. But I just thought, Chair, if I may, these are really difficult times, and this year was easily the most difficult budget either have been involved in dealing with, and I suspect next year will be worse, and the years after that, if we have been reminded, public finances don't look that clever in future years either. So we need to make the council more financially resilient, and I think that this budget will achieve that. But that's not to say that we won't face into tough and hard choices next year. And I thank the Chair, and I'm sure David would like to sum up in this.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor James, I think it's a convenient and right place, I think, to move to a vote. I'm going to ask Councillor David if you'd like to say a few words before we do that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to echo the words of Councillor Bev with regard to our thanks to Jane Dodds for the work she's done with Welsh Government to get us the floor and the extra funding within the grants that are becoming to the local authority. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank the independent group for allowing me to have a view of their alternative budget after the E151 officers actually assessed the budget. And it is true that there is certainly some merit in some of the measures that are put forward in that. But I think it's fair to say that they might be more appropriate for future years, possibly next year, when we can assess them and actually present them to services and allow them to see if they can integrate them into their integrated business plans, etc., etc. So on that basis, as I've already communicated to the independent group, I look forward, if I'm still in this chair, I look forward to sitting down with you next summer and having discussions, early discussions around that to help formulate a budget for 26, 27. One thing I would say that we're in extremely difficult times, and I think there's reference being made to the October budget and the extra funding that did come into Wales. Not as much as perhaps we deserve, but it was extra funding, and we've been very short of extra funding over the last 14 years. And the projections prior to October were that we would, in all probability, have been facing a flat cash settlement. Now, if that had been the case and that been realised, it wouldn't have been an 8.9% council tax that you'd be looking at today. It would be more something like 16.5%, or a further £8 million cut in services. So when I've approached this budget, I've had to take into consideration not just the accountancy, not just the figures around the budget itself, but when you're talking to an organisation this side, you've got to look wider than that. You've got to look at the macroeconomic impact on the budget, inflation, interest rates, and indeed the cost of living. We fully appreciate the pressures that our residents are under, and that's why we try to keep the council tax as low as possible, and why we've invested further money into the budget to protect the most vulnerable people in Powys. And if you actually look at some of the latest assessments coming out of some of our areas, if I take perhaps the largest and second largest towns in Powys, Newtown, when last assessed, only 74%. 74% of residents in Newtown do get some help with their council tax, whether it be in the form of single occupancy or pure council tax reduction scheme for those on low incomes. As to Gunlice, I think, and Brecon are on 63, 64 thereabouts. So there's Llandod is 72. There's significant help going into our larger town, and we've had to take that into consideration, because what we've got to look at to brought this council tax down to 5%, which is our original forecast. You'd have been looking at another £4 million of savings. And there's only one place that £4 million could come from, because there's only one pot of money. You know, I think sometimes people out there think that the council's got a money tree or something or other, you know, it's of no accord. We can spend what we want and we're not really accountable for it, but we are. And all we had was £355 million. So the only place that would have come from is directly from services. And it's something they're thinking about taking another £4 million out of services. When you consider where we are currently, we've already cut to the bone. And going forward, it just emphasises the challenges facing us as we go forward. But that's the balancing act we've got to do. We've got to try and balance the cost of losing valued services to our residents with regard to, firstly, the protection we can offer through the council tax reduction scheme, etc., and the impact of the loss of those services on the residents. And so that's where we are. It's a balanced budget. It offers financial resilience going forward, and it offers financial sustainability. So the consequences of not applying these disciplines to this budget and any future budget, as I mentioned earlier, will just place us on a very, very slippery slope where this type of decision might be taken completely out of our hands, and somebody else will be making it for us. We won't have a say in it, and that won't do our residents any favour whatsoever. So I do implore you to think very long and hard about this, and I hope that you can find time to support this budget. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor David. With that, I think the debate that we've given this, I think we're at a point now that we can move to a vote. We have 9 recommendations. I'm sorry if there's an echo, but there's not a great deal I can do about that. If you could all please mute. What I'm minded to do is take the first 3 separately and then the last 6 as one. Let's go, Clive.
Sorry, Chair, can I remind you that we haven't done the second for any of the propositions yet, so can I?
Okay, well, we've had a proposition from Councillor Richard Church, and we have a seconder in Councillor James. Yeah, so we have a proposer and a seconder.
Technically, Councillor Richard Church didn't propose, Chair. He proposed a motion to proceed.
Okay, I beg your pardon.
We do need, I think Councillor David is going to propose, and Councillor James is just seconded.
Councillor David, proposer.
Chair, recommendation 1 is that the medium-term finance strategy for 25 to 2030 as set out in Appendix A, the report be agreed in principle.
Councillor David. And that will happen in a normal way, and you'll see a vote coming up in the chat box, I presume. And that's already there. If anybody is having problems voting, if it could please indicate, and if anybody at home is struggling, I will take a verbal vote. So it is now in the chat box. Any members having problems voting? Councillor- Can you indicate, Councillor Rafe, how you look? Councillor Rafe, 4. Any other members having a problem voting? All appear to be okay in the chamber. And at home? No, I can't see any indications that.
Chair, I
anybody's
can't vote.
Councillor
Against.
Ed. Councillor Ed?
Against.
Councillor Ed against. Any other members struggling to vote? Okay. Steve? Yes, please. Yeah, we'll now close the voting. Bear with us. Just be a few moments. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I have the results of the vote. Votes are 34 for, 25 against, 4 abstentions, total votes cast 63.
Thank you very much, Clive. We will now move on to the second recommendation. Councillor David, over to you again.
Thank you, Chair. The second recommendation is the revenue budget 25-26 with the inclusion of an 8.9% increase in council tax in 25-26, shown in the financial resource model in Appendix B and Table 4 of this report.
Thank you very much. Again, we will move, seconded by Councillor James. Yeah, and we're ready to move to a vote. So that vote will appear in your chat box now. It should be there. Again, any members, please indicate if you're struggling to vote. Councillor Rafe again. Councillor Rafe 4. Councillor Ed, are you having problems this time? Are you okay?
Yeah, again, against.
Councillor Ed against. We have a 4 and against. Councillor Rafe 4. Councillor Ed against. Any other members having problems? Can't see any hands up. Everybody happy? Okay, I'm prepared to close that vote. I'll take that as read.
We now know what the figure is. Happy? Okay. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. We have 33 for, 26 against, 4 abstentions.
Thank you very much, Clive.
Chair,
Carried.
Chair.
Now move on to item 3 regarding the funding floor. There will be an amendment, I understand. Clive?
Chair, I understand from Jane that we now know the amount of the floor as well as percentage, thanks to Councillor Bev. And so if I pass you across to Jane, Jane will tell you the amount of the floor in terms of money. James.
Thank you, Chair. So I can confirm that the settlement floor has been implemented at 3.8%, and that gives the council an additional 1.226 million for the floor.
Thank you very much, Jane. So we vote for 3 basically. I now know 1.6 million pounds.
So recommendation 3.
Recommendation.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Recommendation 3 will now read the funding floor of 1.226 million pounds as provided in the final local government settlement is allocated to support highways.
Okay. Do we have a second of that motion? Councillor James. Is that a formal amendment? That is a formal amendment. Yeah. Sorry. To debate. But.
We'll get there in the end. I'm still thinking. Sorry, I didn't know. I didn't switch my mic off. No, I couldn't switch it back on. Councillor Allen, of course, the amount of the floor was roughly known and indicated as part of the debate process. If you want to prolong the matter and have a debate on it, I can't oppose that. But it, in reality terms, it was already known at the time of the original part of the debate.
Well, I'd propose that we cut the funding for that £100,000 funding for officers for electric cars and add that to the.
You've already
Move we go to a vote, Chairman.
Sorry, who said that? Councillor Richard Church. We have a move to go to a vote. And seconded. Can Councillor Derry do? Yeah. Okay, I'm happy to proceed to the vote. We have a proposal from Councillor David. Seconded by.
No more on top.
Councillor David.
Oh, it's up to you. We lost the main vote, and it's up to you.
I
don't know what the amendment is.
Oh.
To this thing, it will happen. This is what I'm saying. You do. You do.
Councillor Richard and Councillor Alex, can you just make sure you use it?
That's what we're voting on.
Councillor Garrett, see your meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett. Voting, yeah, that's now in the chat. Thank you. Councillor Garrett. Councillor Ray, you able to vote? Thank you. Councillor Ed, have you been able to vote?
No, against.
Councillor Ed, against. Anybody else? Councillor David? I can't vote. Councillor David. 4. Not being so. Anybody else? And everybody at home being able to vote. Apart from the votes I've already taken. Okay, I'll close the voting now. Right, we'll take some now. Last 6 will come in one.
Thank you, members. Have the result of the vote 54, 11 against, 2 abstentions. Okay.
Motion is carried. As I said earlier, we're going to take the last last 6 recommendations as one block. I'm going to hand back to Councillor David.
Thank you, Chair. Recommendation 4 is that the fees and charges register in Appendix E. 5 is the capital strategy and capital programme for 25 to 30 shown in Appendix H. 6, the minimum revenue provision statement is set out on Appendix H. 7, the Treasury Management Strategy and the Annual Investment Strategy in Appendix H. 8, the authorised borrowing limit for 25-26 as required under Section 3.1 of the Local Government Act 2003 is set at £500 million and the operational boundary is set at £486 million as set out in Section 3.113 of this report. And finally, 9, the prudential indicators for 25-26 as set out in Section 3.109 to 3.116 of the report and Appendix H. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Do we have a seconder for that motion? Yes, Councillor Matthew. Again, members will move to a vote. That'll appear in the chat box in a moment. It's there. Thank you. Councillor Rafe. Councillor Rafe 4. Councillor Ange. Councillor Ange against, and Councillor Clare 4. Councillor Carroll. Councillor Carroll 4. Councillor David, you've been able to. You've done, okay. Councillor Ed at home, have you been able to vote?
I've been able to vote this time.
Okay. Everybody else in the chamber been able to vote? Here's so, and everybody at home. Okay, we'll close the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. We have 54. That's 504. Oh, the wrong one, sorry. Gosh. Sorry, members. We have 37 for, 23 against, 4 abstentions.
Thank you very much.
So, Chair, that's one more vote than we've had in the previous ones, and it is accurate, is it? So just check it. Thank you.
Is that accurate?
64 members, yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that vote is carried. Thank you very much. Right, members, we move on to the next item on the agenda, item 4, and this is the Corporate and Strategic Equality Plan 2025 to 2027. The report author is Catherine James. And we have a recommendation 10.1. So Catherine James, Catherine, are you going to lead it?
Chair, I know that a number of members in the chamber are probably looking for a comfort break, including me. So I'll be as brief as I possibly can do. This is the update, the annual update to Council's Corporate and Strategic Equality Plan based on the Sarah Greener. And what's required today, hopefully, is that Council will approve it for its publication. The Strategic and Equality Plan can be found on page 331 in our pack. And members will note that it reaffirms our 3 wellbeing objectives, and the actions that we need to take to deliver on those. The original plan was developed using the priorities in the Progressive Partnerships Powers which we presented, like which we as a cabinet presented in at the start of this council in May 2022, and annually it has been updated to determine the activities for the years following. So in this case, from the year 2025 to 2027, which is the time of the next around council election. And the update follows a review of the plan supporting actions and measures by all the council's service delivery leaders across all areas and issue electorate. If we agree this plan today and it's published in April 2025, it will ensure that we meet our statutory obligations set out in the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And these, as members may recall, require the council to implement wellbeing objectives in accordance with the 5 ways of working, which, as I may just remind everybody what they are, and it is very appetite considering the discussion we just had about the budget, that we think long term, that we have a preventative approach, that we collaborate with others, one I'm particularly keen on, involve the users of our services and integrate our approach to delivering those services wherever we possibly can. And we must also contribute to the 7 wellbeing goals and meet our statutory obligations under those which are listed at bullet point 3 in the cover report. So the plan is reviewed annually to ensure the objectives and activities are relevant in terms of delivering improved outcomes for our residents and the communities scattered across the enormous county. But we also have to ensure that the plan is realistic and achievable within the financial climate, and that helps back again to the discussion we've just had. So it's advised to the council that it continues to integrate strategic equality objectives into this corporate plan. So we have 1 plan instead of we used to have 2, and now we have 1, and ensures that the equality agenda is integral to everything that we do in the delivery of the corporate plan and our ambitions within it. An important point is that the plan is supposed and does align with the Paris Public Service Board's wellbeing plan, and I'm usually the council and chair of the Public Service Board, and also the Regional Partnership Board's work at that. The Regional Partnership Board of the RPB is an area plan, and showcasing the possibly plans in line all these plans together for obvious reasons. And I can report that the 151 and officer both support the recommendations which are enclosed here, and I'll come to those up at the end of the discussion that people would have. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Councillor James. We'll now open this up to debate. I've got 2 hands up so far. First is Councillor Peter Lewington. Councillor Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking at Objective 3 that states that we will work to tackle poverty and inequality to support the well-being of the people of Paris. Listening to Councillor Joy's comments earlier on today, could I ask why there's no mention in this report, or indeed no acknowledgement, of the important role and the work that's undertaken by our anti-poverty champion across Paris?
Councillor Peter. Yeah, I think Councillor Matthew, did you want to come back?
Thanks. I can answer that. This isn't about any individual councillor. This plan is about the corporate organisation that is the council. And it is absolutely correct that tackling poverty is one of our objectives. But that by no means takes away any of the work that Councillor Jones does as the tackling poverty champion. She works really closely with me and the Child Poverty Task Force to amplify these issues and find solutions to address them. But this plan is bigger than any individual member. It's on all of us. We all have a corporate responsibility.
Very much, Councillor Matthew. Hopefully that addresses your question, Councillor Peter. Councillor Ali Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Just like the last item on the agenda, the scrutiny recommendations, there's no comment at all within the table about the 4 recommendations here. It leaves it absolutely blank. Now, it's difficult to vote on something when you don't know the Cabinet's view. And the explanation for why the previous papers were blank as well. It's not acceptable.
So there's a comment there from Councillor Alid that no response from Cabinet.
That's correct, because we've only received them very, very recently.
It was ages ago.
Beg your pardon, sorry.
We scrutinized this a long time ago.
I'm advised that's complicated.
It's more than 5 days.
Sorry.
Hi. Yeah, can everybody hear me? Yes, just checking. Yeah, so scrutiny took place. So it was virtual scrutiny. So the documents were received on the 28th of January. Feedback was requested by the 5th of February. And then we actually had a sort of little meeting within the joint scrutiny group on the 7th of February and that's where the recommendations and the observations and notes were derived. And that went through then to Cabinet on the literally like not long after. So I think, Councillor James, you do have some commentary against them, but actual formal responses have not been provided yet, given that there is an 8-week time frame by which Cabinet do have to respond to those.
I can just inform the council. I do have with me, supplied by council kindly, recommendations from the scrutiny committees and the joint meeting scrutiny. You're not here.
Oh, I'll take it out. Go on, try again.
Sorry, somebody's got their mic on. Sorry, my apologies. I do have a list of recommendations from scrutiny. In fact, there are 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, there are actually 12 recommendations that have in total spread across the scrutiny committees and the joint meeting. They will be responded to by Cabinet in due course. But you know, a point taken. But they're not here. They're not here in today's report. That's absolutely correct. Yeah. Point taken.
Councillor James, how would you react to anybody who said that they weren't able to vote
on the basis that they didn't have that information? It's just that's how it is.
All that we're doing today, Chair, is presenting the updated version of the corporate strategic report and quality plan. Catherine that will confirm that there were significant additions to that the wording of the plan. In that we've incorporated into the objectives some of the assessments from services themselves, the self-assessment and so on of how they're delivering, and so we're able to measure how we're doing against the objectives within the corporate plan. Now, Catherine can expand on that because into the detail if so desired. But there are specific recommendations from scrutiny which we will specifically respond to in due course. I know that it's not only satisfactorily accepted, but there is within the Constitution a process by which scrutiny makes recommendations to the Cabinet, and then there's a period of time the Cabinet to consider those and make a formal response, and we will do so.
Anything you want to add,
Catherine?
Yeah, so many of them were observations, which I'm sure Cabinet will have a response to, but there were actually 4 recommendations went there around clear targets, it being more forward-looking, outward-looking, not forward-looking, an easy read version and a timeline around that net zero element as well. So those are things that we are within our gift and easy read version, but clear targets, that isn't something that we usually put within the corporate plan itself, but rather on the 3 scorecards that support the corporate plan. It is part of that. And as you know, if this is approved today, as we move forward each quarter, we have the ability to make amendments and strengthen. So when it comes to more outward looking, that's not something that we could have done within that short time frame. It's something that requires, you know, a bit more collaboration with lots of officers from around the organisation.
Okay. Thank you, Jane. Moving on to Councillor Lucy Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just, as a member of scrutiny, it just all feels a bit pointless in a way. If we're scrutinising work prior to a budget to make sure that the Cabinet is happy with what's going forward to the budget, if we don't have that budget response before we're all voting on it, what's the point? Just doesn't seem worthwhile. Thank you.
Yeah.
No. Councillor James, you sort of already have, haven't you?
Yeah. Slightly, I don't think the scrutiny rate. This is an update of an existing plan, and there's no dramatic change. It's actually all that really has happened is that we've strengthened it and made it more understandable for those who might wish to read, and actually be able to relate what it says to how we're actually doing, and how the services are delivering and how that's been assessed and how successful that is. And I just think I'm not sure that the scrutiny recommendations, some of them, as has been pointed out, most of them are observations. I mean, one of them, for example, says that we should be, objective 2 shouldn't really be about employees, it should be about service delivery. Well, that's a point of view. It's not one I agree with. One of our objectives is that we make Powys a really top-class employer, and I think we've made great strides in that direction, and I'm very pleased about that, because we're a major employer in the county, and it's very important from the perspective of the people working for it, but also for the general economy of the county. So, you know, that objective was laid out by the council, the corporate plan was achieved by the council, and that hasn't changed. So I'm not sure that there is it's a slightly normal situation whereby scrutiny recommendations are responded to after it's been through council. But that's just the way the system works. And monitoring may wish to expand that.
Thank you, James. Alan, see your hand up. You've already had 4 minutes, I'm told, so.
Very quickly, Chair. I'm interested in the timeline around net zero. If the Cabinet want to reject that, that's fair enough. If the Cabinet think there's merit in looking at the timeline around net zero, that's good. But we need to know Cabinet's opinion. That's all I'm asking for. Yes or no. Do you agree or don't you agree? And can be said for the 4 recommendations.
Thank you, Alan.
Still 5 seconds left, I think.
Yeah. Chair, I think we're all realistic about the net zero target or aspiration. Welsh Government is realistic about it as well. And indeed, the message that we're receiving from Welsh Government is that what the expectation is that whilst they don't wish to in any way dilute this as has been pointed out, you know, a really important process of trying to decarbonise the Welsh economy, Welsh public services. It won't all be achieved by 2030. Everybody understands that. Costs involved are substantial, and indeed the processes are complex to get. And so I think it's correct. It remains an aspiration, but I think we're realistic that it won't necessarily be fully achieved by that date. And I think if we start moving that date now at this stage, I think that sends a bad message. Members are entitled to their own opinion about it, and I think we all have our own opinion about it. But as far as I'm concerned, I think it should remain in the corporate plan as is, at least for the time being. And perhaps the next council, the next administration will look at it and say, well, where are we with this? And is this still a realistic ambition?
Thank you, James. I think
absolutely right. I think everybody will have their own opinion on this, and it's up for discussion. Yeah, up for debate. I completely get that. Right, we have 2 more hands up. Gareth E. Jones next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. At the Scrutiny Committee, Joint Scrutiny Committee, I challenged this report quite robustly, not in terms of its content, but in terms of the format of the report. And I'd just like to thank Catherine and the team for actually changing that the format to come back in what I believe is a better format of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gareth, and Councillor Angela.
Am I right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay, lovely. I just wanted to clarify the system around scrutinising this, because it sounds like there's a little bit of confusion. So it was a joint scrutiny session for the 3 scrutiny groups, potentially 33 members then were able to look at this document. We did do it online, which isn't the most popular way for scrutinising sort of complicated documents. But some members of the scrutiny committees, the 3 committees, were represented in their questions put to officers, and these were responded to online live in the document. So we had one joint session of an hour just to bring those documents together. So I just wanted to make that point. And actually, I put my hand up because the leader said there were 12 recommendations. In fact, there were 4 recommendations. There was a whole list of comments that we made. And actually, working with the scrutiny officers, we went back through the recording. We had to work quite hard to find the actual questions, recommendations within, because a lot of that form of scrutiny is basically members' comments. So I just wanted to clarify the system, that it did go through those 3 groups. The 3 members of those groups had opportunity to look online and to attend that 1-hour session. Just in case anybody thinks we didn't give it the due care and attention. And as Gareth has pointed out, he was very robust in his comments, as we would all expect him to be. And I'm very grateful to him for that, as I chaired that session.
Yeah. Thank you, Angela, and thank you, Gareth, for your input as well. And we've no doubt that it was robustly scrutinised. Absolutely no doubt. Do we have any more? I don't see any more hands up. So without that, I'm minded to move this to a vote. The recommendation, as you can see, say again. Yep, on page 329. I'll read the recommendation. It's recommended that the annual update to the Corporate and Strategic Equality Plan as outlined in Appendix A, closed bracket, is approved for publication with implementation from the 1st of April 2025, considering the recommendations provided in Appendix A. We'll move this to a vote, and so we need a proposer and a seconder. A proposer, Councillor James Gibson-Watt, and Councillor David Thomas there has seconded. And with that, we'll move to the vote, which should appear in the chat box in just a few seconds. Is it there? It's there. It should be there now. Again, if anybody's having problems, just let me know. Yes, Councillor Ray. Councillor Ray, 4. Councillor Hugh, 4. Anybody at home? Anybody at home having problems? All seems to be working pretty well this time. Getting better. Yes, if you could close the vote, please. All the businesses are. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. So the vote is as follows: 44, that's 404, 5 against, 12 abstentions, total vote cast 57.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, members. And with that, I declare that motion carried. That, I believe, concludes the business for the day. Thank you very much for bearing with us. It's not been technically very easy, and appreciate your patience and helping me to get through this. It's never easy when you've got technical difficulties. Thank you, officers. Thank you all for attending, and thank you for your input. And thank you, members here and at home. And again, thank you, Lucy, at the end there. Thank you, Lucy. Yeah. And with that, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much, members.